Welcome back to Real Estate, and if you've just joined us, we're taking a look at the procedures involved when closing a real estate deal.
We are still in studio with Samantha Kelly, Senior Associate at Cliffe, Dekker, Hofmeyr. If you've just joined in, you missed out on an exciting discussion that we've discussed around the legalities of property and what will be the best investment vehicle that you would look at, whether it's investing in self or investing in a company or even, for that matter, a trust. Samantha, tell me, I've recently been exposed to COB, substitute of debt.
That one?
Okay, right now with the high rate of divorce that is happening in the country, people have bought properties and are married in COP. And in a question of where the court gives an order that the share party needs to be transferred to the other party, I understood that you need to do a substitute of debt that you need to apply within a legal firm?
Oh, yes. Okay, so when parties are married in community of property and there's a divorce, the transfer process from the spouses are a little bit differently, or work a little bit differently. For starters, you don't end up doing a formal deed of transfer, and you don't go through that process. What we have in terms of ID Registry Act is a provision to say that if the title deed is in both parties' names and one party gets awarded the property, what you would do is endorse the title deed to state that the other party was awarded the property. So it's a much simpler transfer process. With that, and the substitution of data is what you're talking about, if there's a bond over the property, the bank would have obviously initially granted the bond in favor of both parties. What would happen is that the spouse who's awarded the property, they would do a substitution of data in that they would agree to take over the entire bond. So the party who is no longer an owner in the property would be released from operation of the bond, and then the spouse who is awarded the property would then be substituted as the mortgagor of the property and take over that responsibility in their entirety.
And I've heard as well, there's what we call an alienation of land act, where you can buy the liability of a property from, let's say, a property that Hofmeyr is owning. Do you want to tell us a bit about that? Or maybe I've got it wrong understanding.
That one I would have to look into. I have to say, in my experience, I haven't come across that. But I can definitely look into that and pop you an email about that one.
No, definitely.
Let's look at some of the common questions that come to your table when people are looking at, finalizing these property deals. The top three. What are some of the top three issues that you have to deal with?
So I think that practically on a day-to-day basis, one of the questions I'm always asked is, how long is it going to take? Right. And when there is a delay, what the cause of the delays are. So I think that that's maybe a good starting point.
On those delays, do you think that people have a fair enough understanding of the processes, or is it once I've signed my deal, we're expecting to walk into the properties?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of people, once they sign the deal, they think that it's a very simple process to just put the property into the name from the seller to the purchaser. And I think a lot of people don't really know what goes on in the background, and what the process is, how long it takes, and why it takes that long. So I think you've definitely hit the nail on the head there, in that I think a lot of people aren't aware of the process.
So take us through some of those processes.
Okay, so just recapping, when we receive the offer to purchase, we would obviously go through the agreement and firstly look at your conditions of the agreement. That generally, most offers are going to be conditional, the most common one being bond finance. A lot of people aren't always in the position to be paying cash for property. And bond finance CPs, or condition precedent, should I say, they're given approximately 30 days. So already off the bat, you're looking at already a 30-day period in which the purchaser is granted that time to obtain bond finance. So that's already the first 30 days, or already a month into an offer, that you have to, give the purchaser time to obtain bond finance. Once and other condition precedents. Once all the conditions are fulfilled and your offer becomes unconditional, then from that point of view, us conveyancers would start the formal transfer process, if I can say that. That would start with us drafting the transfer documents. We would have to apply to SARS for transfer duty receipts or transfer duty exemptions, which that is a discussion in itself, whether that will be payable, whether transfer duty will be payable, whether there'll be a transfer duty exemption. Currently we're sitting at a threshold that any property under 900,000 Rand is transfer duty exempt. And based on the sort of property you're buying, for example, if you are buying a going concern, you would try to get a 0 rating for your VAT. And when you apply to SARS to get that, they would often ask for proof of that. So that means you'll have to call upon the purchaser to give you leases, for example. You'd have to upload that to SARS. So SARS getting your transfer duty receipt or exemption can take, on average, up to a month. At the same time, concurrently, we run with the process. We apply for rates clearance figures from the local authority. A rates clearance certificate is required for every transfer, and in practice, that's where we experience most of our delays, and this is just due to the fact that you're dealing with different municipalities depending on where the property is located. There could be that there's a faulty water meter first that needs to be repaired before they can issue clearance figures. That in itself can take 6 to 8 weeks to repair a water meter, for example. So when we do face delays, more often than not it would be with obtaining rates clearance figures. At the same time, we are running, we've got 3 sets of attorneys dealing with the transaction. You've generally got your transferring attorney, but then you can't forget about your bond cancellation attorney, who has to attend to the cancellation of an existing bond over the property if there is one, and then your bond attorney, who would be dealing with the registration of the new bond over the property if that's applicable. So in any given transaction, you're also dealing with 3 sets of attorneys, and they are also dealing with their own sets of documents and procedures and trying to coordinate all that.
It sounds like there's a lot that
a lot goes into it.
Explains why
Yeah. But the question I wanted to actually ask is, as an investor, one will look at this and say, do I need 3 sets of lawyers working on this whole transaction? Isn't there a way to simplify this whole process? I'm sure you get that answer.
You would think, but unfortunately, we've each got our own different roles and we've each got our own different clients. So, for example, the transferring attorney is generally appointed by the seller, and we act for both the seller and the purchaser's interest to purchase this property and get the transfer through. The bond cancellation attorney their client would be the bank in whose favour the current bond would be registered. So, for example, if there's a current bond with Nedbank, then their client would be Nedbank, and they'll take instruction from Nedbank. And then the new bond attorneys would be, for example, if it's Investec bond that you've obtained, then Investec would be their client, and they'd be running with that procedure. So more often than not, it would be 3 different sets of attorneys, and that's also just to promote the fact that there's no funny business or any shady dealings with that. It's more often than not that it's 3 separate set of attorneys who will deal with that, and each with their own different clients.
Yeah. No, Samantha, we've run out of time, unfortunately, but thank you for coming in and showing us that good insight.
Thank you so much for having me.
No.
Thanks.
For more information about our show and property in general, email us at realestate@bdtv.co.za.
And that's it for today's episode of #RealEstate. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, goodbye.